This is the Grounded Podcast, episode 4, with Echo Charles, Dave Berke, and me, Jocko Willink. You were saying, Echo?
How's it?
You were saying something.
Yeah.
And I said, just stop, press record, and then complete your point.
Okay.
That's the whole purpose of this podcast.
You're right. Yeah, that was good reminder there.
Yeah.
Okay, so Dave Berke was talking about how he wasn't, I'm going to put it in different words, but you were saying like jiu-jitsu was separate from your identity essentially. Like that's not for me. I'm not a martial artist, that's not who I am, whatever, which is most of us, by the way, maybe not you, but.
So not just separate from his identity. I think what you're trying to say is, you know what a Venn diagram is, right?
Yeah.
Like in Dave's world, there was zero overlap between jiu-jitsu and Dave Berke's life.
Yes.
And then there was when all of a sudden you came to Echelon Front, you started listening to the podcast, and all of a sudden there was like a little bit of there was at least contact. You're like, okay, I get that there's a world over there, but I'm not really.
Yeah, that's
not really. There's no overlap. If they're touching, I get it. There's a thing, but it's not really my thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's fine because I can be in my world and that world can exist, and I'm not mad at it.
Yeah. That's what I meant.
Okay. Yeah. Check.
So, and in a way, it is kind of, and I don't mean like the rigid meaning of identity. I mean like that's because a lot of people say that they'll be like, I'm not a fighter.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a fighter. That's them talking about their identity. They like define themselves or whatever. So it feels like that's kind of what you're feeling at the time. But, and here's the other part that is true for so many people, where I was with you, by the way. I'm not a martial artist. I mean, I've taken judo before, but I'm not a martial artist guy. Anyway, so a lot of other people as well think, hey, I'm not that into it, but hey, everyone around me is talking about it. That's what my bros are doing. I'll at least try. I don't want to be the guy in my circles not doing it. Mm-hmm. And that a lot of people do that too. Totally do that. Like, you ever seen somebody who, like, I don't know, starts like real estate or something because like that's what everyone's doing in their little circle? Bro, for real. And so it's the same deal. Like there are a lot of people who think like how you thought, like beginning, like going in, and like consider yourself back before you even started jiu-jitsu. Consider how you were and what you were thinking at that time. There are still people who are thinking that. And somewhere in that spectrum, if you consider the spectrum of being, no, I'm not going to do jiu-jitsu. Hey, I like Jocko. I know who Jocko is. I understand what he's saying, and I like it. I dig it. But that jiu-jitsu part, that's mainly for him because he's like that. And whoever else does it, they're like that. I get it. That's one part of the spectrum. All the way down to straight up the guy who's in the game, who has a purple belt now because of their exposure to jiu-jitsu through Jocko. Shoot, how long has it been? 4 years? 15?
3 and some.
Yeah, 3 and some.
Change.
So yeah, maybe like a purple belt situation. So if that's the spectrum, there are probably like a lot of people who are on that spectrum somewhere. Even like I said, where you were back in the day.
You know what's interesting? There's going to be people that come up in a few years that are like, hey, I got my black belt. I started jiu-jitsu from the podcast. And what made me think of that, I go to wrestling tournaments, with my kids, and I've had kids come up to me and say, hey, I started wrestling. I started jiu-jitsu and now I'm wrestling because of the Warrior Kid books. That's been one of the coolest things ever. And kids are just squared away. But Warrior Kid books are 3 years old. So someone that was 11 and read the Warrior Kid book, all of a sudden he starts jiu-jitsu. He gets into high school at 13 or 14. Boom. They have wrestling. I'm going to go do that. And next thing you know, you got a kid wrestling. And that's a huge step forward in life.
Yeah, big time. Hey, do you ever get like what do you call, like a performance anxiety or anything like that, like going in? Because you know how there's like two elements to training. There's more than two. I get it. But as far as what I'm talking about here, it's like the learning aspect and then the performance aspect, you know? So a lot of times, like, when, you know, at higher levels, the performance aspect starts to be pretty significant because of the identity. Like, oh, I'm a brown belt now, I'm a black belt now. I got to represent with my performance every single day kind of thing. So if I go into experimental mode and I get tapped out in front of all my students, it's kind of like, dang, they're going to think less of me. And, you know, and you go down this kind of spiral that might induce some sort of performance like pressure, we'll say. And then on the flip side, if you're, let's say, I'm commonly speaking, if you're a lower belt or whatever, you'll get less of that because, like, kind of like how you were saying earlier, there's less really expected of you. You're in straight up 100% learning mode, really, you know. But are you to the point, or have you ever been to the point where you get like kind of like you feel pressure on yourself to do well in training?
I do, yeah. When we roll live at the end of training, I feel that. I feel it most, believe it or not, I feel it most with people who have trained but trained less than me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't feel it. I certainly don't feel it when I'm rolling with purple belts. You know, when I train with the coaches and whatnot.
Zero expectations.
There's none of that. You know, I want to do well. I want to demonstrate that I'm paying attention and learning, but I don't have any of that feeling when I train with dudes that I've rolled with that are less experienced than me, but they have trained. That's where I feel it the most, without a doubt.
And you know what's interesting about this? So having that mentality of a white belt, right? Which is, I'm a white belt. I have nothing to prove. That is the best way to learn the most amount, the quickest. Yeah. Now, if you can take that and you can apply that to other aspects of your life, if you can, instead of sitting in a meeting or sitting at a school environment or sitting in a seminar of some kind, and instead of thinking, well, I already know this, or I'm here to prove myself, that's the worst and slowest way to learn.
Yeah.
As opposed to, hey, I'm open-minded. I don't have high expectations. Somebody presenting something to me that I may or may not know about. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to listen. I'm going to relax. I'm going to try and put my ego aside, and I'm going to try and learn something here. Like, having that attitude in life is so absolutely beneficial in a multitude of ways in just about everything that you are trying to get better at. Mm-hmm. You know who's a really cool example of just having a white belt mentality, even at a high level, is Jeff Glover. Yeah. Jeff, I'm not saying he doesn't mind getting tapped out, because of course, you know, he's a black belt and he has pride, right? Sure, but he is a guy that he's not protecting himself at all from, oh, I'll roll with you. Oh, I'm exhausted. I'll roll with you. Oh, I'll put myself in a bad position. He would let people start with, we were talking on the last Jocko podcast about starting in a rear naked choke and how you're screwed. Yeah. Jeff Glover, no. Go ahead and start in a rear naked choke. Yeah. Like, let me get two of my fingers on your wrist, and that's where we'll start.
Yeah.
And you know what? If you tap him out, he's like, okay, cool. Or if you do move to him or you catch him, and I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about, because, you know, I'm another black belt at least, and I'm also 500 pounds heavier than him. But Jeff, he rolls with people and just doesn't care. He has a great white belt mentality from a guy that's a world champion, by the way, and who, you know, we talked a lot about creativity when we were talking about the Marine Corps Tactics Manual. Jeff is one of those guys that his creativity level is at the maximum level that a creativity could be in a jiu-jitsu spectrum.
Yeah. Yep. Agree. And man, I know that firsthand when he was training here. I rolled with him one time, and he, you know how, like, okay, so Kimura is he called it, I don't think he called it, he might have called it, but people call it Kimura like a big guy move, you know? Like, if you're a big guy, a Kimura is going to be more effective for you, whatever. So I'm rolling with him, and I'm a lot bigger than him too. He goes, and we're rolling whatever. He puts his hand behind his back, like almost in a Kimura like position. Like, so I'm like, okay, all right, you know, Jeff Glover, give me the Kimura. So I was like, okay. And I learned early on from Dean where that can be like a bluff, you know, when he'll be like, oh yeah, take it, because he's hoping you won't take it, you know. That's like a move that those high level creative guys do sometimes.
Double reverse psychology.
Yep, exactly right. The reverse. So I know that, so I'm like, whatever. So I go for it, and like already sunk in essentially, and what he does, he gets his other hand,
it goes behind his back
and just grabs his hand. So I'm like, and I'm trying to do it, but I'm like, wait, do I just muscle it? Because kind of thinking to myself, I didn't muscle it. But I'm thinking to myself now, like, I could have. I'm not saying it would have worked. He might have knew exactly what he was doing. I don't know. I'm thinking I could have tried to muscle it, though. But then I'm thinking, wait, what does it take to have in your mind to just let me do that to you?
Yeah.
You know, like, what if I muscled it and got it? He's putting himself at risk.
And you were probably a purple belt at the time.
I was a brown belt at the time.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and that's another thing. It's not like he did it to the new white belt guy who he knew exactly what he was doing. It's like you get a guy who's good at Kimura, he might blast through that little grip.
Yeah.
You know? And he totally did it. I didn't finish it. I did not finish the Kimura. And he was saying afterwards, I forget if it was like to me or to like us or whatever. He was like, yeah, sometimes like you have to experiment with things. And sometimes you'll get pinned in certain positions or whatever. And I remember later on he's like, yeah, I might give it to you. It's like, but you have to be creative enough to finish it as well.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, that was absolutely true. And he totally just demonstrated it. It's not like a guy who says it and doesn't do it, you know?
I'm really susceptible myself to doing what I know. In jiu-jitsu. I'm very susceptible to doing what I know in jiu-jitsu. And I'm less susceptible in life to doing what I know, but I'm still susceptible. Yeah. I'm still susceptible to just going with what I know, going with what I'm good at. Yeah. I guess everyone is that way.
Yeah, I would think so.
But it's something that I have to be consciously aware of. I can get caught in a 3-week rut of zero progress because I'm doing what I know, even when it's not working. Like it's not working, but I'm thinking, one of my favorite, do it harder, right? Oh, I'm doing something that's not working. I'm gonna do it harder. Yeah. And you know, I keep referring to it. I've got a lot of this book that I'm writing right now. I just finished the copy edits for. But I talk about that. I talk about a woodworker with leadership and how a leader has to know the tools and know how much pressure to apply with the different tools and how to treat a woodworker has to know how to treat different types of wood. Because like I have wood at my deck at my house. Sure. It's called Ipe wood. Have you ever heard of that wood?
Yeah, from you.
Oh, okay. It's from Brazil. And it has either the same or a higher burn rate or measurement than concrete. So this wood that my deck is made out of, it sinks in water. If you put this wood in water, it just sinks. Okay. So when you they build docks with it. And when they build a dock with it, they have to put flotation in it because otherwise it just sinks. So as a woodworker, you have to know, okay, if I'm working with that, it's different than when I'm working with pine. Well, if I take a piece of pine and I put a saw to it, I can get through it and it works. Oh, cool, I sawed it. I do that to a piece of Ipe and it's not working. So what do? Do it harder. And so you see people do that with leadership. Yeah. Oh, I got Dave and Echo. And with Echo, I say, hey, Echo, man, you need to tighten it up. You need to make sure you're here on time. And Echo goes, oh, cool, sorry, boss. And then Dave's late. And I go, hey, Dave, you need to tighten it up. You were late. And he goes, dude, Jocko thinks, he's thinking to himself, Jocko thinks I got to do everything he says. Watch this. And now you show up a little later just to prove a point. And what do? You better show up on time. And you see where I'm going with this. Yeah. I apply the technique, but I just apply it harder. So I have a tendency to do whatever I'm doing and just keep trying it because I think, well, it worked 2 weeks ago. I mean, my primary training partner that I roll the most with is Andy. And I'll try something on Andy and it won't work, and I'm thinking, and it takes me like 9 days before I go, oh yeah. And finally I'll say, hey Andy, I'm doing this. What are you doing? He goes, oh, I'm just putting my arm over here. And then it doesn't work. I'm like, cool. Yeah. Thanks for letting me know. Yeah. He lets me learn the hard way. You know what the benefit of learning the hard way is? If he just gives, it sinks in. If he just says, oh, I do that with him. I'll be doing something and doing something and doing something and it's working. And if I just tell him the first time, hey, this is what I did, he will forget it.
Yeah.
And I'll be able to keep doing it. Yeah. Whereas if I do it for a week and then I say, hey, this is what I'm doing. Man, he was doing this little guard pass to me and it worked 4 times in one roll.
That's effective.
4 times he passed my guard in one roll.
With the same move.
With the same move. That's good. And we got done and I said, okay, what was that? And it was a trick move. It's a trick move where you actually kind of fall and you basically, the person that's passing the guard, you put a Y grip in their armpit and then you kind of fall down. And what the person that's in the guard, what I was thinking was, oh, he just fell down. I just get up and get on top. But I can't. So when I untangle my legs to get up, I can't move. So he's automatically passed.
So good.
And it worked. It worked 3 or 4 times. And he said, this is what I did. And I was like, oh man, that's very simple. And then he literally hasn't done it to me since. He's tried it 500 times.
Yeah.
But I'm not letting him do it. I'm not letting. And the other funny thing is when he does it now, he falls down. All I have to do is not try and get up and just replace my guard and it's fine.
Yeah.
It's so those kind of things, that's the kind of thing that I'll do is I will stick myself with something that doesn't work and I'll keep trying it. And it's a horrible thing to do. Yeah. And the way that you overcome that is you got to be able to detach.
Yeah.
And the way that I know with the knee shield, right? Like I got a good knee shield. Yeah. And people will beat their chest into my knee shield for 45 minutes. Yeah. I've had people trying to pass my guard for 45 minutes.
I think I was one of those people.
You may have been. Yeah. Without ever saying, maybe this approach is not working.
Well, yeah. Well, in my defense and your defense too, with like Andy or whatever, even though I think 4 times in one roll, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
But when you compare it to like 6 months of the same exact thing, beating your head against it, like that, 4 times one roll to me doesn't create enough of a blip to be like, okay, for it to get ingrained first time.
Yeah.
Even though, I mean, it's going to differ for everybody for sure, because the reason it creates like that big, like that impactful learning moment is because, okay, I try this thing, or better yet, Jocko's passing my guard with 1 step. Which is how you like to pass my guard.
Yes.
A lot. 1 step and he's passed my guard and it's so heavy, it's so ferocious. All right, he did that one time. Maybe he just caught me slipping or not paying attention. Okay, you do it again. I was like, okay, maybe he's just going real hard. I was kind of tired at that time, so he's just going real hard and he's heavy. So, it works. And, 3, 4 times. But down the road, when pretty much all my excuses are exhausted, I'm like, man, there's this guard pass that you're doing has become this huge monster. Unbeatable huge monster. Now, if Dave Berke comes in and is like, hey, I saw that. Or even if you come in and be like, hey, I'm doing this. This is what I'm doing. Yeah. So here's how you defeat it. Then I'm like, oh, all right. Then we roll again and I try and it works. That monster now just got defeated with one little sentence or whatever.
For sure.
So you're like, oh my gosh, I'll never forget that sentence ever again. That's the most impactful sentence I ever had. But if it's like, boom, yes, you passed my guard for the first time with this huge step pass or whatever, and then you say, hey, after the roll or whatever, you're like, hey, I noticed that I got that guard pass pretty easy. This is how you defend it. That guard pass has not become any sort of monster. It was just one of the many things that you were successful with in that particular roll. See what I'm saying? So, man, it's crazy how, like, that's how it works. But here's the thing. When I said in your defense, where let's say I try to do something to you, right? And let's say within like 3 attempts, I get it. I pass your guard with this guard pass. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there it is. There's my answer. Boom. I got a good guard pass for Jocko. That works on Jocko. I proved it. I did it. Jocko's guard is hard to pass. Whatever. Next time, maybe next week I roll with you, it doesn't work, right? The first time I'm like, all right, that's okay. I'm going to do it because it obviously works. It worked last. But here's the thing. You adapted to it.
Yes, I did.
But I'm not thinking that. I'm thinking of how good my guard pass is against Jocko. So I'm like, okay, let me just do it harder, or let me do it faster. Yep. That's what it is, Or let me do this one and then I'll do it. Meanwhile, you not only adapted, this guy's going to be coming with that same guard pass. Therefore, I got to be more ready for it. See what I'm saying? So you're overall adapting to it that I don't really recognize. I just recognize how cool and effective and how excited I am to do it. Oh, I just go harder. Oh, today I had a bad day. I'll do it again tomorrow.
And isn't it amazing that if inside your head, you cannot see how obvious this is as we just sit here and even tell the story. I mean, just as you tell the story, you think, oh yeah, well, obviously the person's going to make an adaptation. Obviously. Yeah. And I do you've picked that up. You've been like, you'll do something to me and it'll work, and it will work one time and I'll shut it down because I'm going to make a little adaptation. I also have you psychologically where you've tried to do that one thing. You'll try a move on me a lot of times. Yes. You'll try a move on me 200 times. So when it works, you're like, cool, got it. And then I make an adaptation. Well, it's not going to work anymore because I adjusted. And that's the thing. Like when Andy was doing that little hand to me, that little V Y-shaped hand in my armpit, what I would have figured out, I was almost figured it out, but the roll ended. What I would have figured out is something he's doing with this hand has got him past my guard. I would have just stopped him from getting his hand in that position, but I wouldn't have known what was going on. Yeah. And so that would have, I never would have made the higher level advancement in my knowledge because I only understood one symptom of the disease, not the root cause of it. Yeah. And so as a good training partner, when you get something that works, man, you explain it to the person because then they can come up with a counter for it. And then once they come up with a counter for it, you come up with a counter for that. For the counter. Etc.
And the game continues, huh?
The game begins. Another thing that I think when we're talking about who's training jiu-jitsu, and to me this is one of the more solid answers that I've given on the interwebs. I had a guy say like, hey, look, I don't like to fight. Do I still need to train jiu-jitsu? And I said, if you don't like to fight, there's even more reason for you to train jiu-jitsu. Sure. Because if you know jiu-jitsu, the chances of you having to fight are less. Yeah. Potential attackers can sense your confidence if you know a little bit of the jiu-jitsu. And you can't fake it, by the way.
Yeah. And a lot of times, I mean, unless you're like some award-winning actor and you're good like under for real pressure, you can't fake it. You ever tried to fake being relaxed? You're not relaxed at all, but you're trying to fake being relaxed. Right? You like, you'll overdo it, and you're like, you seem even way less relaxed than you would have been. You can't fake it. And then additionally, when you are legitimately relaxed in whatever way, however that comes off in a confrontation situation, most, and this isn't anything new, but most like attackers or most like aggressive people or trying to bully or start something or whatever, they don't look for major challenges when they do that. Like a burglar or something. They're not looking for the fortified house as a big challenge for them. That's not what they're looking for.
They're not looking for the house with a giant German shepherd.
Correct.
Growling.
To see how good their burglar skills are. Like, that's not how it works. Yes, exactly right. They look for the guy who's going to cower down or be scared at the very, But yeah, and then they're not scared. They're like, oh, I really got to fight this guy. Like in high school, the guy who's like, hey, hold me back, bro. Like that. Oh. Kind of, it's that. It's most of the time. Bro. Yeah, like when you realize that the guy really wants to fight, you're like, dang, I got to fight this guy
I had a team guy friend that was like, it wasn't me. I wasn't involved in the situation, but there's a couple team guys drinking in the bar type scenario, and the one dude was that guy, like the hold me back guy, and the other guy is a freaking destroyer of a human being, who is such a badass guy, and the guy started like lipping off to some other dudes, and
the hold me back guy did.
The hold me back guy did, and the badass guy was kind of like, well, go fight him. And go ahead. And the guy's like, well, no, he's like, no, go ahead, go do what you got to do. And then the badass guy knocked out the guy.
The other guy or the hold me back guy?
The hold me back guy. Knocked him out. Knocked him out. Picked him up. Buddy carried him out of the bar. It was like a situation. You know what I mean? Hey, you're gonna run your mouth, and then you think I'm gonna get in a fight with some other people and quote unquote hold you back, or at least defend and step in and fight and get arrested or whatever. Yeah. No, you know what? Boom, knocked him out. And then Buddy carried him out of the bar.
That guy's a hero, by the way.
Yeah, that's a solid move. When Dave, so your kids are now doing jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, all three of them.
What is that? What is that bringing to the table for them?
Man, what you were just talking about. Actually, the answer you gave. That's something I've started to explain to my kids about conflict in life. I have an older daughter who doesn't like conflict. And I can tell she sort of naturally cowers away from conflict. You know Rebecca. She's not big, outspoken. She's not a loud person. She doesn't like public speaking. She doesn't like anything that makes her uncomfortable. She wants to avoid that.
She didn't mind singing the other night.
She's getting better. But and 6 months ago would have been different. I guarantee it.
By the way, I owe you $4 for your children.
Oh yeah, they know that.
They're hitting you up on that.
My oldest two are old enough to understand that conflict in life, you cannot avoid it. It exists. If you are not prepared to respond to it, someone's going to take advantage of that. Someone's going to put you in that position, and if you do not have the skills required to be prepared for that, you are at the most risk of having to deal with something you don't want to deal with. I've had that conversation with her. And jiu-jitsu has been the best vehicle I have to get my back up. My son's 5, he doesn't understand anything. He thinks he's a ninja. He likes wearing the gi. It's all good.
That's an easy sale.
It's so easy. He loves it, and it's all good. Not a ton of cognitive stuff going on with him, but the older two, also they're girls. They're small, and neither one of them are predisposed towards aggressive behavior, and they think that I'll just avoid it. I'll just go through my life meandering around and getting away from it. Like, that is not going to happen. The best way you're going to be able to avoid conflict is actually be prepared to handle that conflict. My oldest is now at the point where this is straight out of a conversation we had, is that she will fight with Whitney. She will go at it toe to toe with her mom. Mm-hmm. And guess what? She loses every single time. Mm-hmm. And what used to be is I have to explain to not fight with your mom because your mom is going to beat you in this. And I'll say, hey, when you're rolling, and there's a bigger girl in her class, and I'll see it. I'm like, when she pushes and you push back, what happens? She's like, well, she eventually just pushes me over. I'm like, that's exactly right. When you go force on force with this other girl, when you push as hard as you can and she pushes as hard as she can, what happens to you? She's like, I end up on the ground every time. This girl's on top of me. I'm like, so what did your coach tell you to do? And she says, my coach told me when she pushes, I should pull. I'm like, yeah, that. And I said, when you push against your mom, do you ever win those arguments? She's like, no. So I can actually start to explain to her using that metaphor of, and it's crazy how much she understands that. Now, I'll be honest with you. That doesn't keep her from pushing hard against. It doesn't.
There's some other psychological things.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. And I don't have any illusions that she understands it. And what it's given me now is another language to explain all the conflict in her life that she doesn't like and she responds to that I see is completely. I watch it. I'm like, this is the worst answer you could have. Is your worst response possible. That was available to you. You went with the worst game plan. I was limited in how I could, and I also was limited in how I could get through to her because she's my daughter. She doesn't want to listen to everything I say, no matter how smart or articulate I might think I am. She just doesn't want to listen to me sometimes. So I can actually say, hey, what did Coach David say the other day when you were rolling with there's a big girl in the class. Mm-hmm. I mean, she's 11, she's a good 5-6 inches and probably 40 pounds on my daughter. Mm-hmm. What did Coach David say about pushing back against her? So for me, look, there's a lot of things. I want my kids to be prepared to deal with the worst things that happen in life because I know that if they don't have that, they're more at risk. And I've said this to her as well. I said, what kind of dad would I be if you were an adult and you weren't prepared to deal with a situation, what kind of dad would that make me? And she'd say, you wouldn't think you're a very good dad. I'm like, I'm not a good dad if you as an adult can't be successful in every situation. Mm-hmm. Jiu-jitsu is the best thing I've got going for me with that, because my words aren't enough right now. There's enough resistance that she's my daughter, that the things that I say, even when they're right, she doesn't want to hear it all the time. And so she just blocks me out sometimes. And now I got another language that I can use with her. And then she gets to actually use it on the mat too, mm-hmm. which is the best part about it, is that she has a physical vehicle to do that. When I say the jiu-jitsu piece has been the best thing for my kids in the last 6 months, it's actually been the best thing for me as a parent, because it's a place that I never thought I'd take them. It's something I never thought I'd introduce them to it, and I never thought I'd give them a way to learn the lessons that I already know in a way that isn't just me lecturing my kids. And I also, I think, was smart enough to let them figure a little of that on their own. I didn't force them into it and say, we're going. Mm-hmm. It's like, hey, do you want to go? And I've got them to a point now that they asked if they could go to the jiu-jitsu camp we did a couple weeks ago. I'm like, man,
that's awesome.
It's so good. And I said this on the last podcast about jiu-jitsu has made me a better parent. I'm dead serious, man. It's made me a better parent. I can connect with my kids in ways I couldn't before using something they understand. And for those of you that underestimate what your kids can learn, they are capable of learning more than I ever thought they were capable of learning, faster than I expected them to as well. And that has been a huge revelation for me as a parent.
And it helps, and when I say helps, I'm totally understating it, that you do jiu-jitsu too. So it seems like it'd be almost impossible, right, to quote unquote speak that language if you're just sort of chilling and making them go.
Totally. We work out kind of as a family on Saturday. We do a family workout in the garage, and almost without fail, at least my oldest will ask if we can roll a little bit. Mm-hmm. And guess what I say?
We know what you say.
100% of the time, no matter what's going on, the mat comes off and down on the, and we train. I don't care we'll do it. What do you want to do? Whatever she wants to do. And me being able to communicate with her in the same way. I mean, how many things do you think my daughters do that I have done that we can talk about? Yeah. I never took ballet. I've never done most of the sports they do. I didn't do. And I don't really have any interest in those things either. I watch them because they want to do it. There's a real conversation that we can have. And I also, for being somewhat inexperienced, I can tell them how I feel the same way that they feel. And I explain to them, and they actually see a little bit of, they think I'm Hulk Hogan. You know what I mean? They're like, I'm the biggest, strongest guy. My son Matthew, while Jocko was at my house the other day, he said, "Are you stronger than Jocko?" And I'm like, "No." He goes, "Really?" So there's a little bit of dose of reality of, hey, the Berks, we're not the biggest kids on the block. You're not going to be the biggest kid in class. You're not going to be the strongest kid. There's a little dose of reality of my kids are small, they're skinny, they're like me, but they actually don't have to be victims of anything. And I get to have that conversation not because I'm the biggest, strongest guy, but because I'm doing something that they're doing too. That connection, man, for the people that are listening and thinking about that, the jiu-jitsu piece for me has been awesome. It is awesome for me, but it's mostly the most powerful part of it is how it connects to my kids because they're doing it. And that's the part that when you ask me a question about it, that's where I think the most is the most influential piece.
When you were talking about the fact that you have this other metaphor, which is obviously very, very useful, a shared metaphor and a shared language. But the other thing and we talked about this on the Tactics podcast, on the Jocko podcast, was the fact that it's a real thing. Mm-hmm. Like, you really feel what it's like to have someone outmaneuver you. Like that, it's one thing for Dave to explain to his daughter that, hey, someone else can outmaneuver you. They can outthink you, and they can beat you and put you in a position where you no longer have an influence over what your fate is.
Yeah.
Like, you can explain that to a kid. You can explain that to a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old. They're going to grasp some of it. But the actual act of someone outmaneuvering them and putting a chokehold on them that they cannot escape, that makes you think, okay, I know what that feels like. I don't like it. And now all you have to do is explain that happens in life.
Another thing too, and again, I want to be humble in the way I talk about this, but you've had a lot of questions about what type of training kids should do. There's a Muay Thai class right after Jiu-Jitsu, and about half the time they stick around for that, maybe get part of it. They like kicking the bags and stuff. You know what's never happened to any of my 3 kids in Muay Thai? None of them have ever been punched in the face. They've never been hit because they're working on bags. They got pads. They're with it. All 3 of my kids have been wailed on the mats. They've all been choked. They've all been armbarred. They've all been tapped repeatedly, but they've actually never been punched in the face. So the first time they're ever going to get punched in the face is when somebody punches them in the face, and they're going to have and you talk about this all the time. It's the one martial art where you are in contact all the time. So when I talk about an armbar, I talk about a choke, they know what it feels like to be choked. They understand that. They don't know what it's like to get punched. And I can't really replicate that. And I love the fact that
you will eventually. I mean, you want them to be a little bit older, but yeah.
Well, they're I want them in those striking classes too.
For sure.
But the striking classes don't replicate anywhere near the same level of reality. Like you're saying, it's a real thing. An armbar for a 10-year-old is still an armbar. It hurts her arm, and she has to tap to get it to stop. Yep. And she has to think about how she got there. A choke for my 8-year-old is still a choke, and the air gets cut off from her throat, and she can't breathe.
Yep.
There isn't a way to replicate that reality and other things they're doing at that age, and jiu-jitsu allows that. You talked about it all the time, and I'm like, okay, that makes sense cognitively. I got it, but with them, they feel it and see it. You say it's a real thing. It is actually a real thing, and they understand that, and that sinks into them so fast that other things that it doesn't sink in because they're just words and there's no connection to it. That's the other reason why I think if I was only going to do one thing with them, it's unquestionably jiu-jitsu. If I only had one thing, they're going to keep doing Muay Thai. I love that they want to do it. The striking is awesome. Jiu-jitsu is the thing that is most real to them because they feel it for real all the time.
What other sports are they playing?
Mats in baseball and football, for a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
And the girls do dance and gymnastics.
Really? Both of them do dance and gymnastics.
Yep.
That's a good combination. I mean, gymnastics. Dance. I mean, I had both. I had one daughter ballerina, one daughter gymnastics. Yeah. Both of them did jiu-jitsu and all that, and one of them wrestled. But the discipline in ballet, my daughter that did ballet had more injuries from ballet.
Oh, sure.
Than my other daughter had from gymnastics and wrestling and jiu-jitsu. Ballet is savage. It's savage. Like the amount of stress that it puts on a person's body when they're 12 years old. I don't even know if it's necessarily healthy. I think now my daughter is a little bit of a psycho, and I think she went a little bit harder when she was 13, 14 years old. Like she went harder than she should have. And I think so that has something to do with it. But, like she had like the stereotypical, like some immigrant from the Russian ballet that was like, this is the way we do things.
Hardcore.
Yeah, hardcore.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, those are great combinations because and in fact, we had a guy come to the gym and he's a white belt. And he comes in and I trained with him. And it was a gi training. This was like 2 years ago. Gi training. This guy's really, really good. I mean, not, he's not like a threat or anything, but he's really, really good for a white belt. And I'm like, man, you feel great. How long you been training for? He's like, I've been training for 9 months. And I'm like, and he felt like he'd been training for a long, long time. And I said, really? He said, yeah. And I said, what did you do gymnastics? Because, you very, you feel really good. And he goes, no, I was a dancer. I did ballet he was a professional ballet guy. And he was phenomenal. For as long as he'd been training, he was phenomenal. He was like, I'll come out and say he was like purple belt level, low purple belt. Like he was that good. Why? Because he had that proprioception. He knew where his body was. He had flexibility. He was strong. All those things are awesome. And so the ballet and the gymnastics is the same way. I mean, the gymnastics is you're going to be strong as hell. You're going to be flexible. You're going to have the incredible proprioception. And the thing you got to watch out for, in my opinion, in both those sports is, those are hard sports on the body.
Yeah.
Gymnastics and ballet are hard on the body. Ballet, hard on the physique too. Guess what you're going to get told when you're a 14-year-old ballet girl? You know what you're going to get told? Be skinny.
Yeah, you're too big.
Straight up. And my daughter is skinny. And for her to be getting told when she was 12 years old, be skinnier was not healthy.
No.
I don't think that's healthy at all. So you got to be careful of that.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
I don't know what the future holds for them in any of those sports, but something that they're getting exposed to now that we didn't have an opportunity before is water sports. Mm-hmm. So they're both doing lifeguarding.
Oh, that's so good.
They're both starting surf lessons to get you. And I wanted them just comfortable in the water.
Oh yeah, well you're going to get a little more than you bargained for on that one.
Probably.
Once they catch a wave.
Yeah.
Once they catch a wave, I came over to your house the other day, and I had been surfing with my little daughter. And my son was actually that little fam surf scenario. But, you know, the smile that a kid gets after they catch a wave on their own that they paddled into, I don't know that I've seen a bigger smile from any of my kids than a good, like the first wave, the first 5 waves or something that they catch. That is a very good feeling. That is harnessing the power of the mighty ocean, something that you at some point have an intrinsic fear of, right? I mean,
sure.
As a human being, as a little kid, you're like, oh, many children, if they're not exposed to it at the right time, they can be afraid of that thing.
Yeah.
And you should have a healthy respect for the ocean. So when you go in and you go against those waves, you paddle into one and you harness that power to propel you towards the shore, that can put a big smile on the face. And that can become an addiction. My son, when there are good waves, my son cannot contain himself. Like it's like he's like a little, he comes running into the house. Like if he's at school and there's good waves and you can see the waves as he's coming home from school and he can see that there's good waves, he comes in there like he's on fire. He's on fire. He's throwing his book bag down. He's running to get his wetsuit on. He's running to the board. He's waxing as fast as he can. He's running out there to the ocean. I've been driving with him where we start going by, up the coast of California. We're going to a surf contest or something, and there's good waves at some random place along the way, along the 101. And he sees them, and it's like I have a freaking dog in the car that can see chicken or steak just lining the road, and you can't contain it. And so you got to be careful, Dave. You say you want to get them comfortable in the water. Next thing you know, that water is going to steer them. And I'll tell you what, going in surfing for me may have had the most profound influence on my entire life. Because what happened was, I was a kid. There was a lifeguard up in Maine who was a great guy. His name is Mark Seeley, and he was a surfer, and he was a damn good surfer. And when I was 10 years old, he came to my apartment one day and said, hey, Jocko, I'm going to teach you how to surf now. And so he handed me a surfboard. He went over the basics with me, and I went out and caught a wave. And at that point, I knew that was something I was going to be doing for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. So then there's another big thing in my life that I wanted to do, which was I wanted to be, some kind of soldier, some kind of commando. So from being in the water, so I continued to surf from age 10 and on. And also I was surfing in Maine where the water's cold and it's dark and there can be ice, there can be snow on the beach as you're going surfing. I mean, that's the scenario. So when it came time for me to join the military and I looked at the various service branches and the commando special operations units in the various service branches, there was one that was oriented in the water, and there was one that was you could either be stationed in San Diego, California or Virginia Beach. Now, when I was a 15, 16, 17-year-old kid about to join the military, California, to me, it was something that it was like saying, hey, we're going to go to Mars now. Like the fact that I could join the military and go to California, this faraway place where they had waves and the Pacific Ocean and all these different surf, because I read Surfer Magazine, I'd see all these, I'd see the Sunset Cliffs, the Malibu, the Rincon. Like, yeah, those are things, I read about those things, but they seemed, it's pictures in a magazine when you're a little kid. There was no internet. I had a couple surf movies, on the VCR.
Oh, yeah.
So that guy teaching me how to surf made me decide that the the special operations unit I wanted to go into was the SEAL teams, and showed up at the SEAL teams. And guess what? The things that get people to quit the most in the SEAL teams is the cold water and the water revolutions themselves. And since I had grown up surfing in Maine, cold water, I got out to California. I was like, "What? Are you serious? You think this is cold? There's no ice on the beach." So yeah, the water sports for kids are awesome. And obviously, as I was sitting here thinking about, we talk about jiu-jitsu all the time. I know for a fact that other disciplines and other sports, people find the same sort of outlets and connections with their kids. So I'm not trying to say that it doesn't exist anywhere else, and that if you play, basketball with your kid, if you play baseball with your kid, like those are all awesome. Those are all awesome, and you can make those connections and you can learn those life lessons. I mean, there's entire books that are based on the life lessons that you learn from football, the life lessons that you learn from baseball or whatever sport. So those are all there. I will say this though. There is not baseball, not football, no other sport gives you that pragmatic skill that you can actually apply in a worst case scenario in your life.
I'll add one thing to that in what I've seen as a parent, because I don't have a strong connection. I watch them dance. I watch them do gymnastics. I like watching that. And it's really from my oldest one. The other two I don't think have quite gotten to that place. When my oldest comes back from training, I had a dance go fine. How was gymnastics? There's just not, when she comes back from jiu-jitsu and she wants to talk to me about it, and she goes, "Hey, do you remember the tall girl from last week when you were there?" She goes, "I almost got her today." She's so much more fired up about being successful in that. Mm-hmm. And look, I'm not trying to force her into that. I'm playing a long strategic game in my mind of what's best for her. But I can tell when she's in the game, not just because she's trying to make me happy. When she is doing something well and successful in that, she's more fired up about that than anything she's ever been. And so that actually makes it easy for me, because she feels how good it feels to do well in something like that. And I, as a parent, take a lot of satisfaction when my kid comes back and she goes, "We did King of the Hill today. I came in second." Yes. And she's super fired up, and she's also thinking like, "I think I can beat this girl." And she's not like that with anything else. I don't know what she's going to be like with surfing, but I love the idea that she is naturally connected to wanting to be successful in something that it makes her genuinely happy about something. It's like that, I think the trick as a parent is expose your kids to as many things, see which way they go. You can't force them in another direction. And I'm not trying to compete with my wife, maybe, but that's how she feels about jiu-jitsu when she comes back. And we talk about that, and she is genuinely engaged on that and wants to get better at it. And she's not like that with other things. Yeah.
And that's one thing that, you may hear this, you may hear people talking about it and how good it is. Like just hearing Dave talk about how it's the number one thing you would do with your kids, right? That's going to make any parent at least consider it. It's going to make some parents go, "Okay, that's it. We're doing the jiu-jitsu thing," and they're going to try and force it down your kids' throats. And you have to be very careful with it, just like you have to be careful with anything else. And I think from a family leadership perspective, if you want to, because I screwed this up with my kids. With my kids, it was, you are doing jiu-jitsu. This is the way it is, especially with my daughters. And the mistake or the advice that I would give is, number one, you don't force them into it. Number two, and this is a leadership lesson that we teach over and over and over and over again, is what you do is you explain to them why it is important for them to do this. And I think when I would explain why, it would be like in extremis explanation. It'd be like, cause you gotta be able to defend yourself. That's not the time to do it. I already blew it as a leader. So what you have to do is, early on, you do the reverse thing. What you say is, "Hey, this is like one of the best things you can learn. And here's why. You haven't even taken them to class yet. You just get it in their head that that's what they want to learn. And I will tell you one more little parenting / leadership tidbit. The things that stick the most and embed the deepest are the things that you applied with the least amount of pressure, and that you planted the seed and you just nourished it and let it grow. If you do that as a leader, if you do that as a parent, those are the things that stick. I am actually surprised with some of the habits and some of the personality traits that my kids have that I know where they got them from. But the ones that embedded the deepest are the ones that I basically led through example. I showed them, but I didn't try and apply with too much pressure. Because when you apply with pressure, it's like you get it to stick. I was talking to John Dudley, who's my archery coach, I guess, if that's a word. Anyways, friend of mine who's helping me with archery. And he was talking about the creation. You have to build arrows to do archery with. And it takes a little while, because one of the things that you've got to do is you've got to epoxy some of the parts together. And for one particular part, when you epoxy it together, you need to use epoxy that takes about 24 hours to dry. And he says there's some people, they want to speed up the process. So they use an epoxy that takes 30 minutes to dry. And when you use an epoxy that takes 30 minutes to dry, guess what? It's more brittle. That's the way it is. So you don't end up with the same adhesion. So when you try and rush and force things, you don't get the same adhesion to the brain, whether it's people that you're trying to teach, whether it's people that you're trying to lead, or whether it's your own kids. The more you try and force that and speed it up, the less long-term impact you're going to have. So be careful with that.
Yeah.
With that, I think that's a good spot to hold it up. Echo, anything else?
Nope.
Dave, anything else?
No.
All right. Well, that's all we got for today. If you want to carry on this conversation on social media, Echo is at Echo Charles. Dave is at David R. Berke. I'm at Jocko Willink. If you need any gear for jiu-jitsu or for life, you can go to originmain.com. If you want to support this podcast, you can go to jockostore.com. And I have another podcast, which is called Jocko Podcast. And you can listen to that one too. Anyways, that's all we got for now. Stay grounded.